Hey everybody, hope you're all doing well. My name is Steven and this is the Storytime channel. Today we have some pro-revenge stories and our first story of the day is by an anonymous poster. Scumbag Aunt ripped off my grandma for years. I put my nose in her business and had the IRS financially ruin her. This happened about 5 years ago. My grandma was getting old, late 80s, early 90s. She had one wish, to not die in a senior home. Easily done as my grandpa sold some assets way back when, then invested the money and let it ride for 30 plus years. He never touched it and collected a pension. Way back when my grandpa died, about 10 years before this, my grandma appointed my dad, this crappy aunt, and my uncle as the trustees of the trust. Basically, the trusted advisors for her and her care for the foreseeable future. All was well in the beginning, then my dad, Willie, moved further away and couldn't take care of the day-to-day upkeep as the trustee, and to see that my grandma was okay. My aunt, Rebecca, told her that she and my uncle, Fred, who lived in Arizona, could take over and all would be fine. It was fine for a while. A few times my dad went back to visit and noticed my grandma didn't always have overnight care or that her mail wasn't picked up and the driveway wasn't plowed. She also lost her cable TV and newspaper subscription. My dad figured it just lapsed, so he had the services put back on. My dad also noticed my grandma was eating moldy food at times because her truck was sold and she had no transportation. She drove up to 90 years old. She basically just chilled at the house alone and did crossword puzzles. The craziest part of this is that my aunt only lived 2 miles from my grandma, but my grandma told my dad she saw Aunt Rebecca once a week on Saturday for about 1 hour. As with the elderly and age, my grandma passed away. She did get her wish and was able to die in her own home. Upon her death, things started to get real interesting. Once the probate lawyer got her children, my dad, aunt, uncle, and another estranged aunt, Becky, around the table, some shady business started to come out. My aunt Rebecca asked that everyone just forego any audit or paperwork and they just sell the house for around $400,000 and divide up the remaining back account balance of roughly $400 grand. So just signing on the line, each sibling was to get a check for $200 grand. Not too bad of an inheritance. My dad thought that was somewhat a little rushed. He said at the time that he wanted to wait because my grandma's house was easily in the $600 grand range based on size and location. My aunt exploded in his face, cursing at him and calling him all kinds of names because he was unwilling to sign the assets then and there. She basically wanted a quick close while everyone looked the other way. My dad ended up leaving the room after the screaming and the deal wasn't signed that day. It took nearly 6 months before another appointment and they were all back at the table. The thing is though, when you're a trustee and the person dies, the funds and access to financial accounts are all under heavy scrutiny until all beneficiaries are made aware and sign the final papers. At the next meeting, my dad went in there with no intention to sign the deal. He got his brother, my uncle Fred, to agree that they audit the entire accounts going back 5 years. When they demanded this again at the meeting with the lawyer, my aunt ended up arguing that a forensic audit would cost $5 grand and it's a waste. Like, what difference does it make? 2 beneficiaries requested it, so it was what was going to happen. The audit report showed up about 3 months later. Here is where it gets good. My dad began looking over the audit report and saw it was full of holes, like excessive monthly food costs for a 90-year-old lady. Payments made for car services for a car my grandma no longer had. Many different things in there that just didn't add up. My dad asked me to give the audit a second look, so I spent a Saturday night going over it, and here is some crazy stuff I found and alerted my dad about. 1. Costco monthly food costs of $1,100 to $2 grand for the last 4 years. 2. Telephone bills for 6 cell phones. Grandma has a home phone only. 3. Gasoline for a truck my grandma didn't have for like 4 years and easily $400 a month. 4. House repairs paid to my aunt's husband who owned a construction business. Some of the house repairs were like 16 grand for a new roof, new garage doors, home security system which she didn't have, etc. All inflated prices. 5. Grandma paid for my aunt to go to Europe twice on vacation. 6. My grandma was paying my estranged Aunt Becky a stipend of $2,000 a month for the last 5 years, as well as her deadbeat son for $2,500. Every month they were paid. 7. All grandkids were to be paid a lump sum of $10,000 upon their 30th birthday, as that is when the $50 check from grandma stopped for all of grandkids. Guess who was paid out? Her kids and my estranged aunt's kids, but not me or my siblings. 8. My grandma gave loans to my Aunt Rebecca for her husband's construction business in return for equity in the company, which amounted to nothing. These loans totaled about $200,000 over 3 years, right around when the housing bust happened. 9. They also sold her assets like jewelry and whatnot for cash. Because some big-ticket items simply vanished from her house, armed with all this, the next probate meeting was interesting. In the time between my grandma's death and the third probate meeting, my aunt's construction business filed for bankruptcy, so that $200,000 in equity grandma had simply vanished. The probate lawyer was also somewhat concerned and makes it obvious that this was fraud and breach of fiduciary duty, where my aunt could actually get real prison time. After this, the negotiations were much more favorable. My aunt got nothing, literally zero. My other aunt only received $25,000 after all the stipend payments. My father and uncle shared the rest after all the grandkids received the $10,000 payout. The house sold to the first offer for $520,000. That was the regular revenge for any treacherous witch that ripped off grandma and had her eating moldy food. Here is the pro. My aunt probably felt pretty bad that she couldn't supplement her lifestyle with grandma's money anymore, but that was the least of her worries. Since she tried to personally rip me off for $10,000, I took it personally. I don't care how tough you are. The IRS is the scariest thing that can happen to a person. Nobody wants to have their money forcibly removed. I did a little research and found the 3949A. I also had the audit and legal office would provide the full trust and requested, demanded by the IRS. I don't know if it ever was. So I photocopied my documents, had them notarized, and sent off the info to the IRS. I felt like it went nowhere. Then maybe 18 months later, I was notified and asked to come to the IRS building for an appointment in my city. The agent went over all the details, what they found in their research, and then they asked for a sworn statement. It turns out my aunt didn't declare something like $1.2 million in additional income over 5 years. And as such, she owed the IRS around $420,000 plus penalties. There was no way she was going to pay that on a teacher's pension and after her husband's bankrupting his business. Her house was sold, her vehicle sold, and they left the state. Now Aunt and Uncle live in a depressing desert town in the Southwest. The IRS paid me around $60,000 about 3 months after the appointment. She should have paid that $10,000. For anybody that followed this story, are you disappointed that the aunt didn't end up getting some serious prison time because of this? Let me know in the comments down below. Personally, myself, I think they should have gotten some genuine prison time. How does someone withhold over $1 million from the IRS and manage to get away? They sold every single asset they had and fled for the hills. I feel like that's the kind of thing that even though they're living in some desert in the Southwest, they'll always be looking back over their shoulders because the IRS is not something to mess with. And they messed with a lot of money affecting a lot of people. Our next story is by L. Rob Rex, dealing with a gas thief. I've shared this story before and I'll share it again. Several years ago, I lived in the northwest coast of Puerto Rico. It's a very relaxed area with tons of good restaurants and lots of green space. My apartment was on a cliff not far from the water. The electric infrastructure was a bit old, so when it was a rainy season, we'd lose power for a few hours at a time. Not a big deal, I had a gasoline generator. Enter a new neighbor. He lived 2 doors down from me and drove an amazing custom Chevy van from the 70s. All it needed was an epic airbrushed wizard on the side. Sadly though, that's where anything good about him ended. I caught him taking the gas out of an orange jug I'd leave outside in case the generator ran out. Although I saw him do it and called him out on it, he denied it and played stupid. So after the second time, I took all of the gas in the jug, filled the generator with it, and put the rest in my car. I then went to the nearest gas station that had diesel and filled it up with diesel. A few days later, I am woken up by a tow truck backing up to pick up his now disabled van. I looked out the window and you could see the anger on his face. He moved out the next month, and from what I gathered from talking to people in the community, he was a general piece of crap human, and what happened to him was deserved. I mean, yeah, you kinda have to be a piece of poop person to steal gas from people like that. As long as I could afford it, I would probably do the exact same thing. Like, I'd wanna just totally ruin it. I'd probably wanna fill that thing up with gasoline and then fill the rest up with Pepsi or some stupid thing like that. Just a total screw you for trying to steal my gas. And having the balls to deny it and claim you didn't do it when you were clearly being caught like you're Shaggy or something. It wasn't me. And our final story of the day is by Fobinho565, Getting Scalpers What They Deserve. Currently, in my country, they are selling PS5s for as high as $1,600, which is equal to at least 3 months of the average wage here. So, as the title says, I've looked for PS5 listings as sorted by the highest price and reposted some of them on other listings at a much lower price, somewhere around $300, but still credible with the right description. I totally understand being a middleman and adding a reasonable percentage on the prices for your profit, as that is totally fine. But I think you have to be extraordinarily unscrupulous to mark up the price more than 300% and profit off the fact it's a desired gift, especially for kids, and some parents take loans just to make a kid's Christmas. Some of them reduce their prices to acceptable amounts, while others have taken down their listings entirely because of the bombardment of texts and calls. I even called some of them personally to check the waters, and after I said I'm calling for the PS5, they immediately told me there is some kind of error in the site showing the prices incorrectly, apparently because many called for a much lower price. I wonder why. Hope they learned a lesson not to hoard items, making them unavailable to the rest and marking up the price so high. I really like what OP did here, that's pretty smart. If it's any kind of platform like Craigslist that has their public information available, you can definitely mess with them like that. Just totally ruin their day by getting a bombardment of calls because everybody's so desperately looking for a real good value on getting a PS5, not even retail. I'm guessing these scalpers are going to learn from that experience and stick to stuff like eBay and other online platforms where you don't have to give any private information away. I too understand the whole middleman thing and getting a percentage on the prices, but this whole PS5 and Xbox thing has been absolutely ridiculous lately. I know supply's been rough compared to the past releases, but even then, I think the whole scalping thing is just going overboard regardless. I hope it gets resolved or just kind of calms down eventually. But with that being said, that's all the time we have for today. So if you have a favorite story of the day, let me know which story and why in the comments down below. But besides that, if you enjoyed the video, please consider giving it a like, and if you haven't, subscribe and turn notifications on so you'll never miss an upcoming video. No matter what you do, whether it's just viewing the video, liking, subscribing, turning notifications on, I appreciate the heck out of it. Every little thing that you do helps the channel grow that much more, and I can't thank you enough for it. So until next time, I hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll be right here next time on the Storytime channel.